Welcome back to Homeboundless. It's been it's been a long time since I've uploaded things. I think the last video I uploaded was the beginning of May, and I have made videos since. Every time I get around to editing and uploading it, then something terrible happens in the world, and I don't have the heart to do it. I want to say something and do something that'll make it better, but what can I do? And I know it's not just because I'm homebound. Like, I think there's just a lot of terrible things happening and very few people individually with the power to change it. Now, obviously, if we can find a way to all work together for this change will come, be it fast or slow. Change will come. But I think the one thing that I can maybe contribute is just talking a bit about my personal story. I grew up very religious. We bounced around in a lot of different churches, but most of them were Assemblies of God, Pentecostal. Now, Pentecostalism, it has a big range. At one end, there are, snake handlers and women who only wear dresses and maybe have a lot of children. Oh, I wasn't that far. I wasn't on that end of the spectrum, but it was, as I see more and more now that I'm out of it, very oppressive. So I want to talk about my journey, how I went from being a conservative to a progressive, from being very religious to doing my own thing, not being religious, and really how I went from being pro-life to pro-choice. I remember in high school having so many conversations with other students who really just kind of wanted to battle it out with me. And I get it. Looking back, I feel like maybe they were nicer to me than I was to them in the whole thing. I don't think I deserved their grace that they had with me, because I had to take a really hateful stance against them based on my religion. That's one of the things that ultimately made me start to shift. Not necessarily that we had these conversations, but that I always felt so awful because the love and compassion inside of me was at odds with my faith. My faith was telling me that love and compassion couldn't look like that. The best I could do was throw my hands up and say, I don't know, but that's not how you love someone. That's not how you help someone. My change was achieved through my own personal experience, through developing critical thinking skills, through just the passage of time, and probably most importantly, through repeated exposure to alternative lifestyles, alternative faiths, alternative ways of living the faith that I thought that I was living. Because for much of my life, I lived in a small town, a small little conservative town, and then I went to a very conservative Bible college. Like, women didn't have to wear skirts anymore, but that had been a somewhat recent change to the rules, that we could wear pants. Thank you so much. Was very much, everyone thinks this way. This is the way everyone thinks. And there were divergent voices within that community, but for the most part, everyone's very conservative. And the church itself is very conservative. Like, if you got caught dancing, you get in trouble, and you would probably have to write a paper about how dancing is a sin and dancing is bad and you shouldn't dance. And of course, we couldn't drink. Just a lot of rules. And then, after Bible college, I moved to England, and even being involved with the Christian group on campus, after they would have their Bible study, they would all head out to the pub. And I met Christians who smoked and who drank and who swore. Then even eventually met Christians who were openly gay and loved themselves. That was really where a lot of my walls of my box of who I had to be started to chip away, because I'd always been shoved in this box. I was never cool. And so I went through some horrible stuff in my childhood and especially my preteen years. And when we started going back to the Pentecostal church that I spent most of my childhood in, I was in just such a terrible space emotionally, because of all the things I was going through at home. And I didn't have a lot of friends, and the church gave me a peer group of people who kind of had to be my friend. Like, it's not a rule, but you should be nice to everyone. And so I think that's the big key in how they got me in the first place, is they had to be my friend, and I didn't have a lot of friends. So it was a place to find some semblance of belonging. But the more I stayed, the less I belonged. Like, you would think that me being there for such a long time and leading Sunday school classes and being on the worship team and cleaning and always volunteering, like, you would think that I would build some sort of standing with the church. But very few people ever really valued my presence. I would go back after being away at Bible college, and someone else who was even less involved in the church, but had a more prominent family, would be there, and the pastor would always make a big deal about them, and never made a big deal about me. Never really noticed me. And I know that sounds really like, notice me, but it was always the boys, always the men. And yeah, you start to notice that I was never valued. Had the church really accepted me and valued me and given me opportunities to grow and to share my gifts, I don't know that I would have gone on the journey that I did. So in a way, I'm glad that they didn't, but they never really trusted me because I like to play the devil's advocate. I had strong opinions, and it was very much we're okay with certain women taking a leadership role as long as they don't want to take too big of a leadership role. We're okay with them taking the space that we give them, but we don't like it when women try to choose how much space they take up. So that is one of the reasons why I started to really see cracks in my faith, is that there was a lot of oppression just for females. And at one point I was doing a traveling drama group in the summer with some college friends, and we went to Oklahoma and we did some churches there. And there was one that was really awful. I mean, it was so awful. We had been double booked, and the visiting pastor started saying such horrible racist things, and made some very loose and obviously questionable, because it's total bullshit, connection that they did such a thing in the New Testament, and that's why blacks and whites have separate churches. And I was so angry that I nearly had bloody palms because everything in me wanted to stand up and shout against that, to tear him apart with my words. I think my friends were kind of like, like, we can't make a scene here, like, we can't be disrespectful. And why did I have to sit there and take it? Why did I have to let him say such horrible things? And it was a very white church. It was very white Oklahoma. But the woman who brought us in, not knowing that they had booked this other pastor, the woman who brought us in had adopted a black child. And, the things that she heard from them. But that child growing up and hearing those things. I have read the Bible cover to cover. I have studied it. Having studied it, having read it, having looked at it with intention and from a literary perspective, seeing, like, the beautiful thing about the Gospels is that it's 4 different stories with the same source material. And how did they treat that? Because how they treated it really gives you an insight on who they are and their personalities. The Bible is their reaction to the world. I don't want to give Orville spoilers, but it's very much like how the Krill wrote things in a way that they could understand, and that became their faith. But it wasn't necessarily the way that things were. It was the way that they understood them. And having read the Bible, there's some beauty in it. There's some love. There's some compassion. And there's a lot of terrible things and a lot of very boring things. But there's a lot of terrible things in the Bible. So if you can look in the Bible and all you find is hate, and all you find is just condemnation. If you can look in the Bible and you don't find the beauty, you find the darkness, why would you let that dictate your life? Why would you give that value? I'm no longer a Christian, but I really respect when Christians are able to use their faith as a catalyst for social justice and compassion and equality. Everything else, why are you wasting your time? If your God is full of hate, why are you spending your emotional energy and your time and your money serving a God who is not worthy? Well, why did I stay so long? Why did it take me so many years to lose my faith, even when I was struggling to balance my love and compassion with the faith I thought I was supposed to have? Here are some things that I have found that Christians use to oppress each other. First of all, the big one, women should be silent in church, which, again, you're treating the Bible as too literal and didactic when it was a response by flawed people to situations as they came up. And number 2, if your religion oppresses someone, if your religious book oppresses someone, then maybe the problem is in following it and not in letting it go. The other really big issue is the faith is a stumbling block to the wise, which the more educated I got, even though it was like a biblical education, I studied the Bible, but the more educated I got, the less people felt like they had anything, that I had anything to give them, the more willing they were to write off any of my opinions or any of my insights because I was too educated. As I started to let go of a lot of the hangups that I had, I started to try to embrace the LGBT community, started to shift from being very pro-life, because that's what they told us we had to be in church, and very, very conservative, very Republican, because that's what they told us we had to be in church, to be like, whoa, wait a minute. I don't actually think I agree with this, to being pro-choice because Republicans were making a moral stance and then they were not taking any responsibility for it, which is way more reprehensible than to never stand on a moral mountain but still be responsible. Like, that's respectable. And like, now I see it as more nuanced than that. Like, I wouldn't go so far as to call Republicans moral, but at the time that's where I started. Like, whoa, we've been taught that this is the moral thing, but then why aren't we taking care of these babies? Why aren't we helping them with healthcare and even welfare? Like, why are we making it so hard? And the other big bedrock that I had grown up with that needed to be shattered was that America is the greatest country on earth. Growing up in America, there's just so much pro-America propaganda that was shoved at us that we don't question the way that things run in America, because this is America. That yes, some things work really well in other countries. Some problems that we have, they don't have in other countries, but don't look at that, because this is America. America is special. America is great. Once I left America, once I spent time in England, and I did travel around a little bit, but I didn't have any money, so I didn't go very far. But I did spend several years living in England and really trying to throw myself into it and experience things. And yeah, America does not have everything figured out. There are things wrong with this country. And, I think we're all starting to see the cracks now, but going into a different country, especially when I was still very obviously American and George W. Bush was the president and we were involved in a war and everyone was so upset about it. And strangers would come up to me and just rah 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 George Bush, rah rah rah, and all the I don't know if it was a general conversation that everyone had with everyone, or if they looked upon me and I looked so American. I feel like it did die down a bit as I looked less American, but yeah, when you're raised to have a lot of pride in your country, and then you see the world doesn't view you that way. You are not from the greatest country on earth. You are from a country that has some things that people love, like hamburgers, New York, LA, and Florida. Actually, I think for a lot of people, America is Florida. Like, oh no, we're more than Disney World. That's us. With no healthcare. And yeah, other countries have healthcare. They might even have work-life balance. And I'm not saying that England was great and perfect and the best country on earth. Oh no. It also has its own issues. I don't know of a country that has no issues, but I do know that America's not high up on the list. It's not at the top. It's not at number 2, not at number 3. America is a flawed country, and we need to see America for what it is, or we're never going to be able to fix it and make it better. And we need to see other countries as places that have something that they can offer us, that are more than a tourist destination, that maybe they've had some time and introspection and maybe they've figured things out. Maybe we can all work together. So those were the big roadblocks, big things that I learned that I needed to unlearn. There's a lot of other, like a million other things, but I feel like those are big representative things to unlearn. Now, as for my personal journey of how I lost my faith, how I lost my religion, as it were. This isn't really something that I've ever made a big story of, or really even ever like made a public declaration of, because it was one of, if not the most painful processes in my life. And when I first lost my faith, I didn't want to have lots of conversations about it because I wasn't really ready to maybe make other people lose their faith and go through the same experiences that I did. Then Trump happened. And all of the sins of the church were really magnified, and the problem with the way the church taught and told us to think and feel became more and more of a problem. Because when you have so many people believing things like women should be silent in church, women should not have positions of leadership, women should be submissive to their husbands, women should do all of these things. There's so many rules and so many things that are put upon women, and so many things that women are expected to think and do and be. And then there are things that we are not supposed to think and do and be, and women should not be presidents, we should not be ruthless, we should just not be. And also, faith is a stumbling block to the wise. We got alternative facts, and that if something feels like a fact, that it can be a fact, because they are appealing to people who have learned that too much education makes you untrustworthy and means that we don't have to listen to you. So we don't have to listen to scientists. We can reject anything that doesn't support the faith that we have in us. We can say, oh, okay, there's a lot of scientific evidence for evolution. There's a lot of scientific evidence for climate change, but I don't want that to be true. So I don't listen to scientists. Because faith is a stumbling block to the wise. Because people who are smart, they don't have the secret. And, of course, the unshaken belief that America is the greatest country on earth. That all we have to do to remain great is to protect what we already have. Not to expand not to expand the rights to everyone. Not to work with other countries to solve climate change, or at least do something about climate change. But we have to close our doors because America is the greatest country on earth. America is God's country. The few times that I've been able to stomach listening to Trump speaking in a rally and hearing the sing-song that he would put on was so pastory. So playing upon the church crowd's programming. That growing up in a church programmed so many people like me And then people who are still in it, programmed to respond to passionate voices with rise and fall and tempo changes, because no one can listen to the whole thing, but we can remember to cheer at the appropriate times and be passionate, sad, to allow our emotions to be played by someone else. That's what church is. It's saying, yes, come play upon my emotions. Back to me losing my faith. This is why, as much as I don't really want to get into this on the internet, this is why I feel like it's important to get into it on the internet. And I wish that I had been able to do this sooner, because if you don't examine your faith and really hold it up with critical thinking, you are putting yourself in a vulnerable position. One thing that was really helpful in my journey, weirdly, is going to Bible college, because in high school, I was the God girl. I put myself in that box, and in that box I stayed. And then I got to Bible college, and like, no one really recognized me for being the great Christian that I was. But at the same time, I didn't have to be the God girl anymore. So it gave me some small amount of freedom of exploring who I was outside of that box. And of course, there are darker reasons why I lost my faith. A lot of my earlier life, like, I went through experiences that were really painful. Like, my mother has been married and divorced many times, but the first time she got remarried, I thought he was God's way of providing for us, because he had money and my mother was about to lose her job. And so I let my mother marry him, even after he started touching me in ways that I was uncomfortable with, and continued after I asked him to stop. And then later on in life, like, I went to Bible college and I studied drama, because that's what I thought that God wanted me to do. And that was another situation that was really painful. I won't go into that one a lot, because that is not fully my story, but yeah, another situation where the position of power abused their authority. And yeah, women paid the price again. And then, yeah, I went on to grad school, because, well, actually, yeah, I don't really regret grad school. I regret the money for grad school. But when I was in grad school, I started dating a guy I didn't really like, and he didn't really like me. But I thought that God told me that he wanted me to be, we would be together, that this is the one, even though we didn't like each other and didn't really have anything in common. And he didn't like me. At first he told me he liked me holistically, and then I realized over the many months of dating that when he said he liked me holistically, it meant he liked me theoretically. And because I stayed with him, even after there was no connection, there was no romantic spark, but I stayed with him because I thought that's what God wanted me to do. But he started chipping away at everything that made me me. And he didn't get my sense of humor. He thought that I was childish. And yeah, I just he didn't really like anything about me. Which, to be fair, I don't think I liked anything about him, but I didn't make a big deal about it. I didn't chip that away. And he like gotten in my relationships and with my friends, and eventually didn't really have any other friends. And so when we finally broke up, because I realized I didn't really want to stay with someone who made me this unhappy, and I didn't want to stay and risk actually falling in love with someone who was never going to love me back. And if this is really what God wanted for me, God is either I am not hearing God, or God is a jerk. And either way, I had a lot of re-examining to do. And that was the biggest catalyst. It shouldn't have been the biggest catalyst. There are a lot of other things in my life that should have been a bigger catalyst. But that moment of realizing that all these steps that I had taken because I thought that that's what God wanted for me to do, they were all super painful and unnecessary. And now that I'm thinking about it, they all left me in a position to be abused by some guy. And yeah, this superpower that I thought that I had where I could talk to God, either that's not true or God is a jerk. I'm not here to serve a jerk of a God. And other things happen that are not really my story, but I started to see more and more the pain that other people were going through because of the church. People who had loving families and friends, but because they were so rejected by the church, because the church was telling them that who they were and what they loved was wrong and unlovable. When you see the kind of pain that the church can put people through, or that people who use the Bible as a weapon can put people through, how can you see that and still choose that side? How can you still say, this is the path I want to stay on? This is what I want to serve. This is what I want to pour my life and my love and my resources into. So that is really how I lost my faith. And once my faith crumbled, then I was free to reevaluate other things in my life more deeply. In my church, we were told from the pulpit that you gotta vote pro-life, and that means you gotta vote Republican. And so, like, just have in your head, oh, well, abortion is bad, categorically. Abortion is bad. Which, I'm not saying that abortion is great. I'm not saying that it is a beautiful, wonderful thing. I'm not saying that that's a choice that I could easily make for myself. But if I'm in a position where I need to make that decision, then it's my choice. And honestly, if you watched my pregnancy video, if I got pregnant again, I don't think I could do that. For my health, I don't think that I could do that again. If I was in that position, I don't know. I don't know what choice that I would make. It just would need to be my choice. No matter what choice was made, it would need to be my choice. I started to more, instead of looking at it from abortion is bad, categorically, abortion is bad, and this is like where my thought process begins and ends. And that's really the issue I find with a lot of pro-life arguments, is that the thought process begins and ends with abortion is bad. And it doesn't take into account why abortions happen, why they can be necessary. It doesn't really encompass ways to safely reduce the number of abortions, safely reducing the number of pregnancies. So better access to birth control, better access to actual sex education, because abstinence-only education doesn't work and it just makes people feel bad. And that doesn't help them make educated choices if you are teaching them from a point of shame. So if you give people better knowledge, better understanding of their bodies, access to birth control, then they have better control over whether or not they get pregnant. And then once they do get pregnant, people need jobs. They need growth potential. They need childcare. They need maternity and paternity leave. Universal basic income would be nice, especially when when you've got little babies, because they will eat your time and they'll eat your money. Babies are so much, and we don't have a good support system. And to say you must have a baby, whilst saying also, I'm not going to give you any help, I'm not going to give you any support system, you are in danger of losing your job, depending on what job you have. Not all jobs are protected. And then to say, oh, you had a baby, but you don't get time off, you have to come back in, and you don't get universal health care, so you're going to have to pay a lot of money for that baby, just for the privilege of pushing it out. And as soon as the baby is pushed out, it too gets to pay a lot of money for the privilege of being born. If the pro-life movement truly cared about the babies, then it would take care of the babies. But that was the biggest reason. The biggest reason why I moved away from being a Republican, I moved away from being a conservative, because their policies seemed very aimed at making people feel very emotional, whether it makes them feel angry or honestly mostly angry. Don't touch my money. Don't touch my guns. You have that baby. Don't be gay. Don't be trans. Like, very emotional. I don't see a lot of real policy that will solve the problems that we actually have in the world coming out of that. The problem here is that to be able to step back and see this, you kind of need to be able to break away from the basic tenets that are drilled into us that America is the greatest country on earth, that deconstructing political ideology is as important as deconstructing your faith. I'm not saying that you have to tear apart your faith and not have any faith. And your journey is your journey. Just the process of tearing it apart, the way Jacob wrestled with God, you need to do the wrestling. And to do that, you need to have a willing suspension of belief, which is a turn from the willing suspension of disbelief, which is when you watch a movie and you're like, okay, let's pretend this is real, even though no, it's not real. Instead, the willing suspension of belief would be where you say, okay, I believe in this, and this is important to me that I believe in this, but it's also important to me that I do the intellectual work of examining it, so I'm going to suspend the fact that I believe in this and look at it raw. Look at the evidence and then try and come to a conclusion again without forcing my beliefs into the conclusion. So maybe your conclusion will be the belief that you already had. Maybe it'll be different. I'm very grateful to the people who had challenging talks with me over the years. I wish I could say that all it takes is like dialoguing with people and sharing and being open, but honestly, it took so much more than that. I think like just wasn't even so much like the whole let's have a conversation, let's have a debate about this that changed me. Like, I think let's have the debate about this can almost solidify you in your beliefs because you're put on the defensive. But what really helped me to change was to have just living alongside people who are different than me. For most of my life, my family had used my faith as a weapon against me. That I should endure other people's treatment of me, mistreatment of me, because I was the Christian. That I should forgive because I was the Christian. And that because I should forgive, that these hurts that were inflicted upon me should be gone. I shouldn't hold on to them. And basically I should just be some shiny, unbroken doll. I came to see just how much people in a position with no power have been told to forgive. Forgive and let it go. Forgive and let it go. But the people who are in positions of power repeatedly abuse that power and then seek forgiveness with no repercussions. They don't face any consequences because we must forgive. So I'm not saying that forgiveness is a bad thing and that you should never forgive, but I think that it is weaponized. It has been weaponized politically, it has been weaponized in the church. That people don't face consequences who really need to face consequences. But then, people who are not in a position of power aren't given the same forgiveness. They're not given the same right to say, oh, I'm sorry, and not suffer consequences. The consequences fall on the powerless. Can we talk about turn the other cheek? If someone strikes you on the left cheek, then turn and give them the right one as well. It might be the other way around. It's been a long time. I have read the Bible cover to cover, but I've not read it in a long time. You should never put yourself in a position to be repeatedly hurt by someone. And you should never listen to anyone or anything that tells you to put yourself in a position to be repeatedly hurt by someone. Turn the other cheek is a recipe for abuse. And it's one of the big reasons why the church is full of it. The church is full of abuse because it doesn't listen to women, because it pushes a narrative of forgiveness on the powerless, and it tells them to keep themselves in positions where they are being abused. If you find yourself in a position where your compassion is at odds with your faith, follow the compassion. Because that's where all the good stuff is. When I would have these conversations with people about stuff like abortion or like just gay people in general, because I did not go to a church where that was accepted. And my compassion was at odds with my faith. And I felt so bad because I truly believed that I was trying to be a good person, that I was trying to live the best life. But that kind of makes it worse. That I could choose the path that is not compassionate, that could choose the path that actively hurts people, that leads them to commit suicide or run away, and embrace that hatred. Well, no, I wouldn't say hatred. I didn't feel hate in my heart. I felt sorrow in my heart, but that's not what it looked like, and that's not what it felt like to the people on the other end. So my intentions kind of don't count. Like, if you hit someone in the face, but you didn't intend to hit them in the face, they're still going to be hurt. The end result is still that you hit them. You hurt them. This is something that you did and something that they are feeling. So you don't get to say, well, I didn't mean to hit you, so I didn't hit you, and I'm still a good person. How messed up is it to see the consequences of your actions leading to women dying from unsafe abortions, people taking their own life because you made them feel so worthless. And you still hold on to that I'm a good person feeling. When your actions are not good person actions, you're not your fruit, as it would be. Your fruit is rotten. And that's the biggest reason why I lost my faith. It's because the fruit was rotten. Okay. Well, that was very rambly, and I do not envy future editor me for having to try to make a train of thought out of this. The good news is I think I did make my central point many times, so I'll have lots of options to choose from. Thank you so much. Subscribe. I normally make sewing or garden videos, and I have some of both recorded, just waiting to edit them and put them out. See you next time. Thank you. Bye.